Yeah, so I'm the co-founder of Alfresco and Documentum. And anyway, I've been working in enterprise content management for 35 years now. Started in 1990. And I think that's kind of when it started. But every so often, every decade or so, it's just time to redefine it. And we're at that moment now with the advent of AI. So if you look back, once upon a time, we used to describe what enterprise content management was, information management, as being about the right content in the right place at the right time. And that has lasted for these last 35 years. But why is it that maybe we can't quite get all the right information at the right place at the right time? And that's because it's so cheap to create content and so expensive to manage it. That right content at the right place at the right time works if you have people curating the information to be able to find it. And I've spent my entire career in enterprise content management trying to solve this problem. Because right now it's still exploding. It's basically enterprise data is doubling every 24 months. Knowledge workers are still spending nearly 40% of their time looking for information. And it's attention, not storage, that is the scarce asset here. So just like those poor fishermen in that famous painting by Hokusai, we're just rowing for our lives, trying to keep up with everything. So what's the answer? I think the answer lies in this guy, Claude Shannon. Claude might be familiar to you because if you use one of the chatbots that's out there, one of the most prominent ones, especially if you're a developer, is Claude. And that's because he has had a profound impact on our entire digital economy. He actually created the notion of digital by popularizing the term bit and actually connecting Boolean logic to electronic circuitry. But in 1948, he created something called information theory. And information theory is about how much information can flow through a system, what's the capacity of that system to handle that information, and then what are the limits that are imposed by noise? So in an information system, noise is the problem. Noise is all that content, or it's not even content, it's data because it's not being used. And so what he defined was information is the reduction of uncertainty, the resolution of uncertainty. That is what information is, and that's what we need to deal with. So information theory actually gives us some hints as to what the problem is. First of all, noise is just burying meaning. It dampens the signal. He was the one who popularized the term signal to noise. Also, it's about capacity. Is your information fragmented? We saw, yes, it's very fragmented. And your capacity is being squandered unless the information is being used properly. And there simply are not enough people to be able to curate all that information. And then uncertainty abounds. It stalls decisions. It limits work. So these are the things we need to address. And I think it's time to reimagine information management to solve the problem that's there today. We've solved many problems up to this point. But now we can start to solve some of that curation and context problems using AI. We can use architecture to be able to handle that capacity with an open and federated architecture. And agents can turn information into work. So basically we go from storage and processing as information management to an information network with autonomy, where things are getting done for us rather than us doing so much work. So let's focus first on AI. Well, Claude actually had something to do with AI. That guy on the right there is Alan Turing. He invented the Turing test that used to be the standard for have we reached AI, have we reached artificial general intelligence. If you can fool the other party when you're interacting with them, have you created artificial intelligence? Well, we've raised the bar since then, but Claude and Alan Turing came together ostensibly to deal with cryptography. They invented the system that allowed Churchill and Roosevelt to talk to each other under open lines with all the information being encrypted. But they shared a passion for this notion that machines can have intelligence. So Claude actually influenced Alan Turing because he used to play around with all these goofy machines that do things like play chess or just go off and do stuff on their own. He also took his ideas of probability and influenced Alan when he was building some of the decryption systems. Turing, in turn, also invented the core concepts of computing. And that gave Claude a lot of ideas in terms of maybe we should think about information as symbolic manipulation. So the two of them working together laid the foundation for AI today. And now we're at this point where we actually have this AI learned against the entire internet. But now, as Tim said, it's time to move on to the next level. What we find is that content and context matter for AI. Content is the fuel for AI. And where is there abundance of it? Inside of each of our individual systems. It's time to pull those together. And then context, where it sits, how it relates to our systems, to our people, our processes, steers that. And then that makes possible curation and discovery to make context usable. And this in turn creates grounded answers. How do we know that we can rely on this answer? Well, we know because we can have references to where that information was found. This reduces errors, builds trust, and reduces uncertainty. And then agents are off there acting on this grounded context where they can have outcomes, and the outcomes are auditable based upon all this information. So can you even implement AI in the enterprise without managing all this stuff, without information management? And I think the answer is no. The intersection is going to get deeper and deeper between AI and those. So let's look at how that might work. And I'm going to use as an illustration the Content Innovation Cloud and how it works and how it pulls together. At the core of this is a content index. Now, one of the big innovations of content management to begin with was to combine full text indexing with metadata search. That simply didn't exist, believe it or not, before then, unless it was pulled together as a custom implementation in enterprise. But now we can add semantic meaning. That's what vector databases do, is they add semantics to the search and indexing of information. So we now can ingest information, and we're going to use large language models to read it and see, can we understand what's in there? And we can start to ingest and curate that to say, oh, this is like this other stuff here. I found these concepts in here. Let me relate it to these other pieces of content here. We can also have both us and the LLM use tools to pick apart new types of file formats. And then we can take and apply that. Now, notice I'm not showing the storage of the content, whatever. That's content management and information management 1.0. 2.0 is all about how you access it and apply it. And that's applying it in the context of agents. Even us as human beings interacting in the form of discovery. Think of discovery as the next generation of search, where we're just asking a question rather than trying to formulate a search query. That also can use tools as well to take and add additional sources of information, but they're all acting through agents overall. So you get this pattern of response and request, response and request. And that starts to build up a set of patterns that can now be fed back into the ingestion process so that we can reinforce that and make that ingestion and curation even better than before. So this is the overall context and how the CIC works. But the next level of this, where we're going next, is around enterprise context engineering with the enterprise context engine. So what you all have is a huge amount of data already. If you have an Alfresco repository, Nuxio, OnBase, Perceptive, and you probably have years of records, data and decisions, especially domain-specific records that you simply won't find on the internet. You also have processes, you have cases, and I think case management is perhaps one of the strongest signals that can go into how we apply AI. So we can collect all this, connect it to our systems of record, and then compile this as a context package for apps and agents. And what we get out of this is years of experience, and we're not just plopping a piece of knowledge like you would in a chatbot. You might say, I'm going to upload my report and ask a lot of questions of it. In this case, you're actually adding skills of how people and how agents have actually done this before and reinforced that. Just like humans build skill by iterating and working on it. Agents and AI can do that as well. And you can start to get more reasoning from context that's governable and auditable and explainable. So context is so important. As Greg Brockman, one of the co-founders of OpenAI, said, if your answers are wrong, it's usually a context problem, not an LLM problem. And it's our job to take and start to build that context. Now, all this is being built on top of AI capabilities that are just exploding so fast, so rapidly, that you can't even keep up. And a lot of that has to do with open source. There's just compound innovation that's happening because we have open environments, open communities where we can collaborate with things like Hugging Face. It's not just about source code, it's actually about data and models. We have new models that are open source as well. We have real-time community feedback in places like LMSys and rapid innovation on all our agentic frameworks and stuff. This is just exploding, and so open source is why AI is going so fast. And I think it gives a hint to where we can go from here, which gets me into the architecture, an architecture that's open and federated. So Claude would iterate on his architecture of communication, his architecture of information. And he collaborated with this guy, John von Neumann, who actually invented the modern computer architecture. He's the one who created the programmable computer, and that's an example of it right behind them. They worked together at Princeton University, and it was John von Neumann who took the concepts of physics, because he was also a quantum physicist, and worked with Claude to think about information in a probabilistic way. Actually, some of the probabilistic thinking that led to, ultimately, to working AI overall. And they were basically being able to take their concepts and ideas and be able to apply them out in the open. They both love to collaborate in the open, except, of course, when national security was required here. But that's our path, is to be able to take this openness and create new architectures. And so we see open source often wins in certain categories of information. Open source creates that velocity because it's just there. We can take it and use it. We can try it out before we do anything. It generally reduces the cost of implementations and much faster innovation. When you know how something works, you can tune it, you can work with it, you know what the boundaries are to be able to work with it. And it's because of this, it's dominating categories of infrastructure, dev tools, data tools, analytics. And it also provides for interoperability. It creates a critical mass of success. If you can get a system that is used so much, that creates critical mass. When you have niche applications, you can't build an open source community. But this community, if it's big enough, actually reinforces the quality of the product by validating it. And there's nothing better than sunshine to kill all the bugs out there. It's the best disinfectant. So it actually lowers the error rates. So what would you do if you wanted to do enterprise content management in the open today, open source? Well, there's two great examples here, Alfresco and Nuxio. Each one dealing with some specific use cases very well, some better than others, and they both have similar types of architectures overall. These are the things that you need to be able to build applications, to develop user experiences, to be able to develop your processes, and to interoperate with other systems as well. This is a great slate of capabilities, just to begin with. What's not quite there yet is AI, and that's why we announced this new type of capability, which is the cloud content repository that's AI ready. And so we're open sourcing that, and it's exciting. I know I've spoken to some of you, and it's like, wow, this is great news that we can actually have something that is AI ready and super scalable. Now, this doesn't replace Alfresco and Nuxio. It's the core of what's inside of CIC, but it's designed to be a content lake, to be able to take and consume large amounts of information. And there's lots of use cases where you might want to use this to be able to take as an archive for all your maybe systems of record, as an example, or to be able to scale up huge record sets and to be able to start to ask questions of them. As I mentioned earlier today, it's very fast and extreme scale. And then just like we saw federation of CIC with Alfresco, you will be able to federate this information as well. But it's a new style of development where everything is asynchronous. All your extensions are asynchronous and be driven by enterprise buses to be able to respond to that. So what we're going to do is take that new programming experience and make it available for Alfresco and Nuxio as well, so that you can start to get ready and develop new capabilities. Imagine being able to take an extension to a repository and make it work against all of those repositories. That would be the possibility here, a common API that would be available across all those platforms. So it's available to try today. Just log into the Content Innovation Cloud and you're using this new repository, but it's in the process of being prepared. So sometime early next year, hopefully it gets out there, but it's getting ready. Now, this architecture as well should be federated. And this is one of the foundations of the federation is this cloud content repository. And what it's doing is actually providing access to all your different systems. That fragmentation goes away because you're now accessing everything and having a common index that you can start to search and ask questions of. The context can be assembled not just from one repository, but from multiple repositories. Sometimes answers span multiple systems. And so by eliminating these barriers, eliminating this fragmentation, you can get much faster decisions. And then I think that federation is also going to evolve where you can access systems directly in real time, and the AI can start to figure out what is the best and fastest and most accurate path to getting information, so that these can be information apps, these can be agents, these can be user chats that are talking not to one system, but to multiple systems. So this federation is part of this overall architecture and starts to reimagine information management, not just as a container, a storage, which is the way repositories have viewed content management before. It's now about a network of information, a network connecting all these things together, ultimately leading to a network of agents as well. So that brings us to the next leg of the reimagining of enterprise content management, which is agents. A network where agents and information do the work. So Claude loved these experiments. This is what got Alan Turing so fascinated. So he actually ended up building the first autonomous agent and with the first reinforcement learning, to have this little mouse go through a maze and then find its electronic cheese at the end. And you can rearrange it and it will still figure out where was the cheese, but if nothing's changed, you can put it anywhere in the maze and it will still find the cheese. It just go directly to there. This is an agent, but it's a toy. But that's the way he worked. He experimented. And so, you know, this concept actually has a lot in common with agents that exist today. It's reinforcement learning. It's actually going and sensing the world. It's making a plan as to what to do next. And so that's where we get information agents, the enterprise agents. So what is it? It's a semi-autonomous because you want a human in the loop, but it has a goal directed. It's defined in plain English, and it reasons with governed context. So you can take that context from the context engine, and it gives you everything you need, as well as being able to get the information resources that are required through retrieval. It's that orient, though, that is actually probably critical and really differentiates it from things like workflow. It's planning, it's thinking about what happens next. It can decide on its own certain aspects of what to do next, and then also decide what tools possibly to call, or maybe even call other agents in the process. So these enterprise agents are actually taking the inputs from all our systems and turning it into a signal that either other agents can work on or that we can make decisions. So when we talk about an agent mesh, what we're talking about is actually combining and dragging and dropping and composing a set of agents that itself is an agent. And think of it as a palette, you know, just like in a workflow designer, where you can take different specialized agents and be able to drag and drop them in any particular order that you think is appropriate. And then the agents can hand off to the next agent the context of what they need to do next. So here's two examples, probably some of the most important examples that you will see as agents start to come into the enterprise more often. There's a conversational retrieval AI. This is your chatbots where you can ask a question about an unemployment claim or an insurance claim or whatever. Help desk, knowledge bases. And so they're thinking, they're going to all the different information sources that are needed and returning results. Then you can plan, execute, and review is a typical type of thing where you actually can start to build something, build a plan, build a report, and then actually go and send it out and then review the results. Or to be able to write to another system and then review, did it actually work? And then rewind if anything went wrong. So things like content creation, analysis, code generation are examples of plan, execute, review. But in this process, we mustn't lose sight of the fact that humans are in the loop. We're just not there yet that we as human beings are ready to trust these machines out there. So to a certain extent, it's just confidence and trust, but also it's appropriate because humans do things that agents can't. Humans have common sense. Humans are actually good at critical thinking. Humans can negotiate and work with other human beings. And sometimes that's absolutely necessary to understand. Maybe the context is human, why this decision was being made, and the agent simply doesn't know that. So humans are still in there, but now they're going to be 10 times more powerful because they don't have to do the drudgery, all the stuff that nobody really liked. And when we construct these as well, going forward, you probably heard this term vibe coding. Vibe coding is when you just chat with a chatbot and it makes an application for you. Think of it more as coding agents because vibe coding might be a little fast and loose, but we can see where things are going. I want to get something done. Do I need to hire a programming team to build this agent? Well, maybe not. I would think actually a very large percentage of agents can be built just in conversation itself. And the solutions then can be created in days rather than months, assembled based upon that domain intelligence, that context from the context engine that can provide the right level of information, understanding what the underlying infrastructure is and the underlying context of the system. So creating a higher signal, explainable, auditable solutions. And I think at first, maybe power users will become solution builders. Certainly, this is going to be programmers to start with, solution builders, but ultimately, I think all of you will be in a position, I don't know when, but you will be in a position that you will be creating agents as well. So all this has agents multiplying human time and insight. We can start to offload all that tedious stuff of fetching, drafting, filing. And these agents are working in the background. OpenAI created something called Pulse, which overnight, it looks at everything you've said to it and compiles like a whole list of things that you've been thinking about. And so it just says, well, you probably haven't thought about this. That is 24/7 curation and actually starting to collect information, but also 24/7 curing and healing of the information that may be misplaced. It's also institutional memory on demand because it can go out autonomously, collect all this, clean it up, and then make it ready for you to use. So overnight research, and then that leaves time for humans to persuade, to decide, to collaborate. So we can see that reimagining and reinventing information management is about these building blocks of AI, architecture, agents, and this is an information network that does the work. So this is what the Content Innovation Cloud is all about. It's about taking that AI to derive the signals. It's about federation to be able to build that enterprise context and not have the fragmentation. It's about agents doing the tedious work. It's about people and agents actually collaborating, working together. And then the human in the loop is in charge, not the machine. So as we look at this, with AI, architecture, and agents, we can see an example of how that's happening today in a different industry with a different type of repository. Coding agents are showing a glimpse into the future. You have GitHub, and you have these new agents, whether it's Cursor or Windsurf or whatever, they're actually going into the repository and learning everything about your code, and then you're working with them. You're getting anything from about 20 to 55% faster if you're a developer using these tools. And you're creating probably about 8 to 22% more output than you did before. And that's only just begun. A year ago, these things could barely generate anything, and now they're generating entire huge systems. So imagine that type of capability in your enterprise systems, in banking, in insurance, in government. I just think it's going to be astounding, the productivity that will happen. So what will you be building with AI and agents? These are some of the things that I've talked to customers about that they're interested in doing. They're starting to build these things. In fact, it's starting to get to, KPMG estimates that we've gone from about 11% of enterprises deploying agents and AI to 44% of, this was based upon a survey of 130 large enterprises, $1 billion or over, are now starting to implement AI. So they're doing things like chatbots using augmented retrieval. They're building knowledge bases. They're building search co-pilots to help find the information you're looking for, automated help desks. We've seen IDP examples earlier today, automated categorization and metadata, contracts, analyzing contracts, looking for review, rewriting contracts, checking them against new regulations, building deep reports, and then responding to regulatory requests. The list is endless. Anything that is a process, anything that's a case management system today is a potential candidate for turning into AI and agents. So what I'd like you to do is to think about what Claude did, his sense of experimentation. And he also had a sense of fun. Whenever he had this new idea, this new breakthrough, he'd get on his unicycle and start juggling. He'd actually go through the halls of Bell Labs just juggling, I did it. So he did all this stuff, reinvented information, and laid the foundations for information management, not because he was trying to become famous or rich or anything. It's because he just enjoyed it. He liked the game. So I hope you can take inspiration from that. Generations today are still getting inspiration from Claude. This information theory is a foundation of a lot of the latest research in artificial intelligence. But take that sense of fun, take that sense of experimentation, and just try it out. Just go to the Content Innovation Cloud today. Try it out, experiment, see what you can do, see what you can try. And I hope next time I see you, you all will have built an agent. Thank you very much.